JD Vance has been a special type of screw-up lately, and what I mean by that is somehow he found a way to be even more uncharismatic, even more problematic, to create more issues for his boss than he ever has before. So with all that said, JD Vance is doing his best to save face, to suck up to Donald Trump lately, and that all came out in a pretty weird moment when JD started attacking a reporter during Donald Trump's very strange cabinet meeting today. We're going to get into the meltdown from Vance, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really does mean a lot to me. Now, this was a weird moment from the cabinet meeting that wasn't covered enough, but before we get into it, I think we also have to start from this very weird moment.
And I told you before, they're having tremendous difficulty because their factories are not doing business. They made $1 trillion with Biden, $1 trillion, even $1.1 trillion with Biden selling us stuff. Much of it we don't need. You know, somebody said, oh, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, you know? And maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally. But we're not talking about something that we have to go out of our way. They have ships that are loaded up with stuff, much of which, not all of it, but much of which we don't need. And
Donald Trump and really all of MAGA have been talking about the war on Christmas, whatever that means, for what, 6, 7, 8 years now? And Donald Trump is implementing the policy positions of the Grinch. I can't believe I didn't see more people cover this. Just an insane statement to make. Oh, little girls and little boys aren't going to have dolls and toys. What is this platform? The guy who said he was going to make things cheaper is now taking toys directly away from your kids. It is so weird, and somehow not the strangest thing said at the cabinet meeting today. I talked about how JD Vance was attacking the media. So was Pam Bondi with this clip right here.
3,400 kilos of fentanyl since you've been your last 100 days, which saved, are you ready for this, media? 258 million lives. Kids are dying every day because they're taking this junk laced with something else. They don't know what they're taking. They think they're buying a Tylenol or an Adderall and a Xanax, and it's laced with fentanyl, and they're dropping dead, and no longer because of you, what you've done.
So what Pam Bondi is referring to, if you can't translate that conservative gargle and garbage, is that Donald Trump's protection of the border has saved 258 million lives because of fentanyl being stopped. Like, Donald Trump hasn't let 258 million people, because it doesn't even make sense. I'm like trying to rationalize it. I'm trying to figure out what Pam Bondi is trying to say, but this is how low the Trump administration is now stooping. Donald Trump is just saying, I know I've tanked the economy and the stock market is collapsing, but at least I haven't killed anyone, which he did in the last term by the millions with his incompetence. So I guess you can't even really say that. This administration is nonsensical. It's why Donald Trump was confronted to his face. We're going to check that out, and then what JD Vance's response was.
During the transition, sir, you frequently took credit for the stock market highs. You said it was a reflection of how well you were doing in the polls, and then after you were elected, you said the stock market highs were a reflection of how well the transition's going and the American people's confidence in your incoming administration. Now, the stock market's not doing so well, and you're saying that's the Biden stock market, yet you are the president. Can you explain that?
yeah, I'm not taking credit or discredit for the stock market. I'm just saying that we inherited a mess, both at the borders. You could look at every single one of the people here, and no matter who it is, they're doing better, and they are far superior to what took place for 4 years before us. When you look at prisoners being allowed to come into our country.
So obviously, Donald Trump not very happy with being called out to his face for tanking the economy. But like I said, his little lapdog, JD, hasn't done enough lately. He's actually caused a lot of problems. So he stepped in, and his reaction was just ridiculous.
We went from, again, 40 years, we went from the world's manufacturing superpower to one in which we depend on the People's Republic of China to make the things that we need. We went from the proudest military in the world to one in which we failed to meet our recruiting goals. And we went from one in which bipartisan border policy was the consensus of both Democrats and Republicans to one in which we allowed 20 million people to run roughshod illegally over the countryside, causing crime, causing a stress in the welfare system. And again, that happened over the lifetime of the youngest member of the cabinet. And what has happened in 100 days is that we've started to reverse every single one of those negative trends. And I think what it shows to me is that the president, and you sit in the Oval Office and you see these portraits of presidents past, and let's be honest, most of them have been placeholders. They've been people who have allowed their staff to sign executive orders with an auto pen instead of men of action. And the reason the media attacks this administration as chaotic is because the president is solving the problems the American people set about to solve. He's actually doing the things that he promised that he would do. And Mr. President, it's been an honor to be part of it for the past 100 days.
What is he saying? Maybe the media attacks this administration as chaotic because they're reporting the chaos of the administration. Did you ever consider that, JD? And listen, this is a guy who has built his entire political career off of talking about how the Democrats, they talk down to you. Oh, they point their finger, they complain. And that's all JD Vance ever does. He pretends he's this masculine guy, which doesn't even make any sense based on his appearance alone. And then what? Is just a big whiner all the time? I'm so sick of it. I have had enough. He is so aggravating, just annoying more than anything. I know he's evil, but annoying is what comes to mind when I think of JD Vance. These are people who whine about, oh, political persecution, they're coming after us. And that's all that they do, which is exactly what Jamie Raskin was calling out in this clip right here.
And even though you inherit an economy from your predecessor that's described as the envy of the world by The Economist magazine, you crash everything. The economy today is shrinking. The stock market is sinking. Inflation is soaring. $7 trillion in American retirements and wealth has been destroyed. You've plunged us with your imbecilic tariffs into a trade war with the whole world, except, of course, for your bosom buddies in Russia. So now, only 100 days in, with 100 unforced policy blunders, you're the most unpopular president at this point in your presidency in more than 80 years. Barack Obama stood at 69% in the polls. Ronald Reagan was at 73% in the polls. Truman was 87%, and Franklin D. Roosevelt 68%, but Donald Trump is at 39%, the lowest 100-day approval rating since polling began. He controlled the agenda for 100 days. He controlled the House, he controlled the Senate, he's got everything going for him, and his numbers are in the gutter. So now he reaches back into the authoritarian playbook. Go back and please the wealthiest people and corporations in the country. House Republicans want to cut hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicaid, food assistance for mothers and children, veterans benefits, Meals on Wheels, Head Start, any programs that help actual people, all in order to pay for another gargantuan tax break for the president's billionaire benefactors. And here in the Judiciary Committee, our good friends want to help Donald Trump use his power in violation of the Constitution that we are all sworn to uphold and defend against enemies, foreign and domestic. Every day, the administration uses immigration enforcement as a template to erode constitutional rights and liberties. They round up people in the street and disappear them to the torture prison of a foreign dictator without 1 minute of due process, sweeping up completely innocent people who have no criminal record and no criminal charges, in the midst of other people who may have criminal records and criminal charges and should stand prosecution for them if they do have charges against them. They're stripping college and graduate students at American universities of their visas for writing op-eds that the administration disagrees with. They invoke emergency wartime powers like the Alien Enemies Act to fight a military invasion at the border while telling us that the border has never been safer than it is right now. My colleagues say all these measures are necessary to deport gang members, violent criminals, the worst of the worst. But they're not targeting the worst of the worst. They're arresting judges now. They're using federal agents to round up law-abiding members of the community with no criminal records, parents of American children, husbands and wives of American spouses, people who've not been shown to pose any public safety threat at all. They're breaking into cars to arrest mothers, as their children's watch in terror. They're arresting people who are coming in for their citizenship interviews. They're staking out people's homes and trolling through IRS taxpayer data in search of tax-paying people to deport. Look, we know how to remove people from the country who should not be here. President Biden's administration did that. We know how to do it legally, consistent with the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. But the Trump administration has discarded the rule of law. If he can sweep non-citizens off the street and fly them to a torturer's prison in El Salvador with no due process, he can do it to citizens too. Because if there's no due process, if there's no fair hearing, you've got no opportunity to object. And indeed, several American citizen children, including one with cancer, were flown to Honduras last week with no due process, as a Trump-appointed judge in Louisiana found. Now the courts have issued more than 95 preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders against this reign of lawlessness. But Republicans want to enable President Trump to keep going. This Judiciary Committee bill seeks to strip the courts of their power to hold an administration in contempt when the president violates explicit judicial court orders. And it doesn't stop there. While they try to defund the courts, they're forking over an astonishing $81 billion to the administration for more of these immigration roundups. The legislation includes a whopping $45 billion for ICE on top of its annual budget of $9 billion for family and adult detention centers alone. This bill is a blank check to the administration to do more of what we've already seen. And to make matters worse, as they race to spend more than $81 additional billion on this, Trump's own DOJ is terminating hundreds of millions of dollars in existing grants. They're cutting funding for county, state, and local law enforcement. They're cutting funding for opioid addiction treatment programs. They're cutting funding for crime prevention, and they're cutting funding for victims of rape, sexual assault, and violent crimes. The grants being cut support local police in solving and preventing crime. They help the survivors of abuse and assault navigate the legal system, and yet they're being wiped out by the Department of Justice.
I feel like Donald Trump talked exclusively about this weaponization of the DOJ going after political opponents during his campaign. By the way, you know, but none of which was true. And that's all he has now done in his administration. As we always say, every Republican accusation is really an admission of the truth about them. And there are no better examples than that, Donald Trump and JD Vance. And we're going to continue to call him out on this show every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. And if you haven't already, and you stuck around to the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.